All right, so why don't we start with John? I'll make the introduction. So let's start with John because he's away, and then we'll just hit the panel and go through that. We have some. I think all these speakers are great. I mean, I've spoken to all of them this week. Julie Kane's a repeat personality, I guess you might say. But I'll just talk briefly about everyone real quick. But so we have John Peters, who is kind of a fintech whiz, who has you call him a serial entrepreneur with a track record. And what he's done, it appears as if he has identified how you can capitalize a carbon credit to help drive carbon reducing technologies. We have uh, Ahmed Qureshi with Valorant Health, and he's doing something very fascinating, which is using AI to help bring telehealth and AI to underserved healthcare communities. Um, we have Jawahar. You're gonna have to know. Jawahar. Is it Jawahar?
It's Jawahar.
Well, yeah, my notes say one thing, the computer says something else. But Jawahar actually has what is really potentially a breakthrough technology. He says it's sort of like going from vacuum tubes to transistors, where what he's taking is a variety of fuel sources, hydrogen, biogas, ethanol, natural gas, LPGs, and he is converting those into green electricity without burning them. So it is an emission-free uh, process, which really has enormous potential. But what we'll do is we'll start with John Peters. John, sorry to not give you your full due, but you now have 10 minutes to tell us about yourself, your business, and go ahead.
Thanks, Tyson. I'm John Peters with Base Climate. It's good to be here virtually with everybody from up here in Vancouver, Canada. As Tyson mentioned, for over 35 years, I've been a serial entrepreneur, and I've been focused on blending regulatory-driven financial incentives with technology advancements to create new business models. That started in university in Los Angeles at Biola when I was 19. Started green energy in my dorm room. My roommate's electrician father was having trouble selling the new energy saving lighting technology at the time. And so I innovated a solution by combining a lighting retrofit lease and utility incentives that cash flow positive for the tenant. And that took off. And part of the spark that shaped today's commercial building energy financing model with others. But what it really drove home was the power of the right financing model with incentives to create a new business category. Moving on quickly, I took the model to telecom deregulation and the Canada Reconnect and 0800 Reconnects, and we became the largest prepaid home telephone providers in Canada and New Zealand. Similar financing model, prepaid to low income there. Regulatory driven. There's been a few others. I suppose one of the more ambitious ones is I led constitutional changes and legislation from the private side in Latin America and Honduras, leading to the creation of one of the world's most advanced private jurisdictions. So there, the technology was common law, and common law surrounded by civil law for that arbitrage there. But now, to get to climate ambition, where we're focused at Base Climate, we're seeing an accelerating massive movement of capital driven by this ambition. The carbon credit market itself within the space is expected to outgrow crypto within 2 years. But the question that arises, to us at least, are climate funds truly aiding the climate? And I think the answer is yes and no. And yes, because we need up to $5 trillion in capital a year all throughout to 2050 to transition to a low carbon economy, but no, because few climate funds are focused on what we think are important parts of the climate finance canvas that can really drive the change, areas that are struggling. So one of these most pressing underinvestments is in the pre-construction phase of clean fuel projects. I've got one of them, early stage concept in the background here, such as SAF production, where there's proven technology and strong offtake, so strong buyers of the product, credit rated, investment grade in many cases, but there's little capital for the up to $70 million required by these projects in engineering and other services to get a shovel in the ground. That's the phase that these are stuck at. And there's many hundreds of them that are semi-stalled at this stage throughout the world. That this shortfall, this issue, it stems from a difficult to assess development process. It makes it hard for investors to assess risk reward. And secondly, there isn't a portfolio of risk managed projects in the space being managed at this stage of their development. And so, well, there's some outstanding funds in this space. There's not enough, and we need more. And to get more, we need asset owners, we believe, to get comfortable, to help them get comfortable with a combination of large checks for early stage companies and projects in this space with long investment horizons and development risk. And it's not the typical playbook. So that's where Base Climates comes in. We address these issues by providing and managing early stage development services from within these projects, essentially co-developing with the developers. Because oftentimes our team has far more experience in these key early phase structuring services than the developers do themselves, because we've done it a number of times. And often, as these are entrepreneurial-led in many cases, it's their first time. So one example is that we lead with is offtake negotiations. So negotiating with the merchant to buy the fuel. And this changes the structure of the project dramatically. Generally, developers don't start here. They don't get far enough. A recent highlight is our 20-year landmark deal that we assisted Southwest Airlines and USA Bioenergy. Right now, I guess a good example would be there's a project in Europe that was intending to produce biomethanol and biomethanol to SAF. We brought in the right offtake partner that is interested in supplying the biomethanol, so they don't need to produce it, gets rid of the feedstock risk on that side, real essential pillar in these projects. And the offtake's taken care of, and they essentially become a tolling project. So this changed the capacity, it changed the location of the project, it changed their feedstock, changed many things. So many of these services throughout the roadmap that we provide, and by doing this, we're inside the project and able to assess the risk step-by-step stage through this 70 million up to pile of expensive paperwork to get to construction. I'd say maybe an analogy is with tech incubators. So unlike a tech incubator where you get some runway for a startup, and as fast as possible throwing spaghetti at the wall to try to find product market fit. Well, we've already had product market fit here already. And the development process and the innovations, some of them that we bring within it, they're very templatable. So it's very different from a tech incubator in that sense. We can assess the risk, we can manage it all the way through. Was bringing that to the space. And then, of course, a portfolio of risk adjusted and risk rated projects along with the managed process as a platform within it. So that's the core offering. And as Tyson mentioned, on the funding side, we're focused on funds and investors, of course, but there's an opportunity that we're piloting to co-invest alongside funds and investors into these projects. And it's a concept that was piloted in the vaccine industry about 10 years ago called advanced market commitments. Advanced market commitments are a advanced investment into a space with risk based upon future revenue. So in the developing countries, this first pilot estimated to save about 700,000 lives. A company, nonprofit called Frontier, has borrowed this concept for CO2 storage projects, carbon dioxide projects. They put together, and this is in our space, not low carbon fuel projects, but related and tangential to it. And they garnered a commitment of $1 billion from Alphabet, Meta, Shopify, and Stripe. And they're successfully moving money with advanced market commitments at a discount from the carbon credits potential from these projects into the space. And this is sending a strong investment signal, into the carbon dioxide space, within climate transition. We're working on bringing the same advanced market commitments to the low carbon fuel space, where is an interesting opportunity I'll just touch on to wrap up here. So in low carbon fuel projects, there are voluntary credits generated by the project, and there are compliance carbon credits. There's two types. The issue overall in the voluntary carbon market credit space is a quality of credits. This has been an issue for the last 2 years. These projects don't have the quality issue because the voluntaries are in audit alongside the compliance, the regulatory. So we're finding that these credits, the bids on them are far, far higher and stable than the rest of the market. And so it presents this AMC, this advanced market commitment opportunity to co-invest alongside. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity here to present, and your time and interest, and together, hopefully with some of you, we can move some of these countless stalled projects forward to a low carbon future.
So Marty, do you want to get some questions from the audience at this point?
Sure. Any questions for John? How much have you deployed so far? Can you ask him? How much?
So we're at the early stage. We have 2 companies that have been providing these services to this space for the last 3 years. So we have just put Base Climate together in the last month with the AMC opportunity that came up in November that we've identified. So we're at early stage. We raised a few $1 million for projects in our services while doing this, and we've in various stages of 12 offtakes with projects to that particular service, and about a dozen projects with other services also.
I think Katal, we have
Early stage.
John.
Yeah, this is actually an area that we've been in an earlier fund. We had a carbon credit fund. Carbon credits has done some wanky things over the years, especially in the California market. Where do you see, as far as non-compliance or voluntary credits heading? How liquid is that market, and what are we looking at from a standpoint of long-term growth? And the types of projects would be carbon offtake or international projects that your fund would focus on within the voluntary side.
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. So these corporates have scope 1 and 3 their internal portfolio offset requirements, particularly the offtakes for these type of fuel projects. And because of that, there's a strong demand for the voluntaries there. And then you pair that with the quality issue. There's a real flight to quality in voluntary credits, and these are by definition very quality credits because the voluntaries are alongside the compliance credits. So in that particular space,
clarification, you're referring to on the compliance side, meaning like the California market cap and trade, and there's others that are mandatory markets that offset those populations. There's a floor and a ceiling. Do you see, what currently is not of the floor or ceiling, because there's not really one, it's more of a demand based, but what type of voluntary credits do you see more valuable than others?
Well, in these particular spaces, we're seeing bids by certain corporates out there, and it's an opaque market, but 1 to 2 orders of magnitude more than the current market.
That sounds like a lot bigger.
It's big. Yeah,
John
it's
Cataldi, you're on mute. I don't know whether you mean to be.
Oh, I'm agreeing with them. The voluntaries took a dive. There was a collapse of a few markets, but if you have the projects and type of projects, so how do you source? Do you have a deal pipe of carbon offsets? Is it primarily U.S. or international?
so the
A flavor of
pipeline,
where your projects are located.
right? The projects are all over the world, primarily Europe and North America. And so the pipeline of these type of, and in the voluntary credit market, these would be referred to as verified emission reduction credits. That's their technical term, because they're verified through the mandatory side, as John points out, and they are emission reductions. But yeah, so the pipeline is from the projects that we are servicing and managing at the early stage here. So as the projects are developed, they will generate these credits. In the early stage, we're looking to pioneer advanced market commitments to fund the crucial pre-development stage of these projects, which is where the real problem is at. I'd say that's one of the larger problems in the entire climate ambition is this particular space. As I mentioned, there's hundreds, many hundreds of projects in the US alone that are stalled because they don't have access to capital at this early stage. So pairing the AMC voluntary market combination with that, we think has potential to co-invest.
Tyson, can we move on to the next speaker, please?
Absolutely. So let's go ahead. John Peters, thank you. That was brilliant. My suggestion is you ought to get a full slot. What you're doing is, it's huge, but for people to hear it the first time, they need to hear it a couple times before they fully get the opportunity there. But it's very disruptive and exciting. So we're going to go ahead with Ahmed Qureshi, who's going to talk about Valorant health and telehealth and AI and how you're helping underserved communities. And all you need to say is artificial intelligence and just ask, give them your address for checks.
Wonderful. Well, I'm just going to test that this is working. Can you hear me? Just fine?
Yes.
Fantastic. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks for bearing with us. I feel like you guys have probably had a couple of long days. I'm coming out of JPM, so I feel you. We'll get you there. But my name is Ahmed Qureshi, and Tyson, I feel like we know each other well enough now. You can call me by Eddie. And I'm the founder and CEO of Valorant Health. Our team has been focused on building an AI-enabled dual-sided marketplace. Thank you. Perfect. I appreciate that. I swear I'm a tech CEO. But we're an AI-enabled dual-sided marketplace that's focused on the largest untapped healthcare market in the world. So rural America. It's not what you might expect. There's 67 million Americans that live 2, 3, 4 hours away from healthcare. Now, telehealth, as Tyson actually pointed to, is only a part of what we do. Over the last decade, digital health has matured, which includes not just telehealth, but actually clinically validated solutions that folks can do on their own time, asynchronous care, as we call it. And those were the two approaches that's where we started, doing a virtual first approach, and really quickly realized that the last mile problem still remains in healthcare, which is in person. So now we go through all acuities of how intensive is your need, going also clinically agnostic. Basically, that means everything from mental health, behavioral health, diabetes management, primary care, specialty care, across the spectrum. And the underserved populations, as we define them, we started off with public health systems because they're fantastic. Regardless of what you might have heard, the VA is actually incredibly innovative. And we brought on one of our team members, the 9th Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs, Dr. Shulkin, from the Obama and Trump administrations. And we're a small team, we're early stage, but we actually have contracts with the Air Force, with actually Indian Health Services as well, working with indigenous communities in rural areas, and bridging the gap from building this smarter enablement infrastructure so that we can bridge the gaps between public and private and not-for-profit health systems in rural America, because leading health systems will touch about 85% of all Americans, which is fantastic. However, people don't want to travel that 2, 3, 4 hours for preventative care. That's a long ways to go. And the reason why I know this, now I'll spare you all the data analytics, the novel structures that we're building and how we're diversifying data sets, and tell you a little story. I was born in Pakistan, and my grandmother was one of the first female physicians in the country. This is very common in Pakistan. It's a multi-generational family house we grew up in. It's me, my siblings, my parents, my aunts and uncles, cousins, my grandparents, all living in one house. It wasn't very big. We enjoyed it. Now, the reason why I tell you this is we used to have people come to our front door to get care, because women, in some instances, didn't have the same access to care as men. So health inequity was something that was very prevalent for me when I was growing up. And then my family and I, we moved 8 times. We moved 3 different countries, and we ended up in a little town in Arkansas, rural Arkansas, 9,000 people. From where I was from, in Lahore, 10 million people, 9,000 people. And got to experience a whole different type of health inequity right here in the US. And that's the kind of lens with which we saw not just what technology could do, but what remains still, not just from a technology standpoint, but actually a policy standpoint. So we're doing this in partnership. We're not building the entire care delivery system, but we have 40 partners across those different clinical areas that I mentioned. And we work with them in partnership to bring it to these communities and scale the care in a timely fashion. The reason why this is actually possible now is not just because of COVID and like we all became really comfortable with telehealth, it didn't hurt, but the maturity of digital health is one of what I really define as 3 main tailwinds that make this possible now. The second one is actually policy. Patients actually have much more control over their data now than they had in the past. There's actually policies with teeth that have come out. And the last one might not be what you expect. It's actually the physical broadband infrastructure in rural America. I've personally helped patients find their nearest public library because that's the only place that they had access to internet. And this is here. This is in the US. This is a couple weeks ago. And I'm really excited. We're a small team. We're now, we have over 1.1 in ARR. We've only raised $1 million to date. We're in the process of closing down $20 million this year. And here's the upsides of also working with the government. I like to point it out every once in a while. We work with a lot of different stakeholders. We're a for-profit company, but we actually have this amazing opportunity because of the work we've been doing with the Air Force, because of our team makeup, where our chief medical officer came from being Deputy Inspector General of Navy Medicine, to actually bring on capital up to $15 million in non-dilutive funds because of the infrastructure we're able to provide for active duty members as they become veterans as well. So we're really excited about it. And Marty.
And
jump in.
John, Paul, do you have a question?
Yeah. Please.
I'm sorry. I feel like the Where's Waldo. But anyway, first off, I am so ecstatic to hear what your mission is. I work in Native America. We're actually tribal agents of several tribes working with IHS. And as a sovereign nation, working on behalf of a sovereign nation, we're able to help guide policy. I would love to talk to you, afterwards, on deeper into your model and maybe bring some additional tribes to bear. We've been looking for a telehealth partner that's familiar with rural, because it just works so well with a lot of things that we're doing. So anyway, I just wanted to take my hat off to you and thank you for what awesomeness that your mission provides for these rural communities.
And that's the Seminole Indian, right?
No, I was CEO for the Seminole Indian Tribe. I work with a consortium of 14 tribes. Foundational tribe is Blue Lake Rancheria, Economic Development Corporation. Much longer story, but we have 12 tribes in total. But we work both on and off the reservation. So it's not just those rural communities within the tribes, it's wherever the tribe has an economic interest. which is a majority of off the reservation, since tribes only make up 1% of the US population.
Perfect.
Thanks, John. I'd love that. And Marty, thanks. Once John and I have a conversation, we'll invite you over for dinner as well.
Shall we move on? I think we got a real win there. It gives everyone a nice warm feeling. So let's go ahead with Julie Kane. Julie's got a brilliant idea. I'm not sure about you or most people, but very discouraged to see the war in the Ukraine, what's going on in Israel. And, you know, I'm a great believer in democracy and our Constitution and all that. So Democracy Investments has a tremendous index that fits, I think, the proper profile for a US stock market that is overvalued. And it happens that I specifically wanted Eddie to sit next to Julie because they both have that Air Force connection, because Julie was in the Air Force at one point. So she's, I won't say any more because it's completely rambling. So go ahead, Julie.
Thank you, Tyson. Thanks for having me, Marty. And thank you for what you're doing for the VA. I'm a big fan.
Thank you for your service.
I am the CEO of Democracy Investments. We have one product today that is listed on the New York Stock Exchange. It's an ETF, and it's the first strategy to use an all-world ex-US index in developed and emerging markets that is both market cap and democracy weighted. Our prospectus is available on our website. My slides aren't turning. Here we go. So we formed the company during COVID after we were able to negotiate an exclusive license to use the Economist magazine Democracy Index. We were watching the state of the world, a lot of this discussion earlier today around what's going on in China, as Tyson mentioned, the Middle East, et cetera, Russia. The large all-world ex-US indices have been over-allocating to many of these countries in red. We wanted to design a passive index strategy so that we would no longer be over-allocating to authoritarians the way the market cap indices do. So our passive index strategy uses the Economist Democracy Index. And that allows us to over-allocate to democracies and under-allocate to authoritarians. The Economist magazine has been tracking country democracy scores since 2006 with 60 different indicators, which are on our website. And we combine those country scores with the all-world ex-US index so that we are overweighting in countries that care about freedom of speech, fair elections, function of government. The 60 indicators roll up into these 5 themes: electoral process, civil liberties, political participation, function of government. And these are the current scores that we're using. These were the scores used in 2023. We'll be updating this at the end of this month when the new scores are published. China fell down last year to be last on the list, below Saudi Arabia. And you can see the Nordics, Europe, Taiwan, et cetera, do very well. We are not invested in the United States, but people always ask what the score is. Our ranking stayed the same last year because we went up in political participation, more people voted, but we went down in functioning of government. So when we apply those country scores to the all-world ex-US index, it results in these tilts. So this is an ESG panel. ESG is often under criticism for not being transparent. What are the rules? What are the criteria? We are not ESG, and we hold that there should be a D in ESG, accounting for human rights. And critics of ESG have praised our strategy for being completely transparent. It's very simple math using public data. We're holding every security accountable to their country democracy score. So here's what we're most excited about. We launched in March of 2021. So we're 3 months short of a 3-month track record. Excuse me, thank you, Ray. We are 3 months short of a 3-year track record. And the blue line is democracy, DMCY. The yellow line is State Street. The purple line is Vanguard. And the green line is BlackRock. So we have outperformed every calendar year. And since inception, we've outperformed BlackRock by over 6%. Tyson asked me to include this slide, pointing out that there's never been a more interesting time in terms of international being cheaper relative to domestic stocks. With all the conversations we've had today around how to diversify and our domestic stocks overvalued, here's a great way to get international in your portfolio without lowering the cost of capital for authoritarian states. Why would we be fueling their economies with everything that's going on in the world? And that's it. You can find more information at democracyinvestments.com or reach out on LinkedIn, and would love any questions. Go ahead.
Did you actually show the weights, or was that just a change in weights?
That was the change in weights relative to the index. Sorry?
What are the weights roughly?
Actually, I can share that as well. It's rough. China's taken down from 10% to about 2.5%. Japan does very well. Taiwan. Canada, the UK. But while I'm pulling that up, are there other questions?
So this was individual American companies as well for their stakes in, multinational stakes in places like China and Russia?
If their country of risk is defined as outside of the US and they're in a developed or emerging market, then they'd be in our index.
Yeah, I'm just saying if you're like Coca-Cola or Coca-Cola, you could correct, Subway or something like that, you have operations in China and Russia.
Yeah, we don't, if that would be, those would be considered American companies. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Am I allowed to share still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you clarify, are you buying country indexes or actual
No.
stocks within those?
So we're starting with the same 2,900 international equities that are in an all-world ex-US index. We're not picking stocks. So it's the same basket. But while we're small, we're using country and regional ETFs to track the index. And when we get to about 200 million, we'll be in all of the underlying 2,900 securities. But again, 73% less in China and over-allocated to the democracies. So here's to answer your question on the actual tilts. Here's the red line is the benchmark index that we begin with. So you can see we're significantly, the capital is flowing out of China and into Japan, the UK, Canada, France. Taiwan does very well. Canada is the biggest winner in our strategy.
Marty?
Yeah, Marty stepped out. Any other
Are there any
questions?
more questions from the audience? Otherwise, we'll go ahead with Jawahar. Okay. I keep on butchering your name, Jawahari. But
Jawahar.
what he is doing is brilliant. It is very disruptive. I have an energy startup myself. I think that the idea is brilliant. Basically, what he is doing is he's taking a lot of fuels and converting it into green energy without burning them, without creating emissions. And he does that with his green electrical power unit. And he's going to talk about his company now. And go ahead, knock him dead.
Thank you, Tyson. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you, Tyson. Thank you for inviting me. The first thing people ask us is, what is it we're doing that is different
than everybody else has done. From advent of time, we've been converting stored energy into useful energy through combustion, burn, burn, burn. What we figured out is, why do we have to go through combustion? And we took the stored energy, converted directly into electrical energy, bypassing the combustion cycle. That's the basic principle behind what we're doing. So to start off with, what are the needs? Why do we need it? Climate change. 2023 was the hottest year recorded in history, 1.5 degrees higher. Greenhouse gas emissions are causing these issues. And any new technology that comes in has to be affordable. If it's not affordable, it cannot meet the marketplace, and it cannot address the real solutions that need to be implemented. And we have other underlying issues that we need to address: energy security, transportation efficiency, and the list goes on and on. So what we focused on is just the first three parts. Can we address the first three parts? And the second, fourth, and the fifth would be a subset of what we're doing. So what we ended up with is inventing what you're looking at is a power module that will convert, if you put any energy source and air into it, directly into electricity without going through combustion. This little power module is designed to generate 0.5 kilowatt clean energy. So now that you have this, what do? You can assemble them and compound the power into what we call a Q tower. So each power module generates 0.5 kilowatt. If I put 6 or 12 on them, I can generate 5 kilowatts. Well, what will 5 kilowatt do for me? This little unit will power the house off the grid for you. Continuous power. Well, how much would it cost? Well, the real cost to you would be 2 cents a kilowatt hour. So if you're burning or using 30 kilowatt hours a year per day, your monthly bill in electricity and energy is going to be $20 a month. Not 600, not 500, you're off the grid. And finally, what does it do? No greenhouse gas emissions. And most importantly, it is smart power. It just generates when you need it. You come into the room, you turn on a 100-watt bulb, it will generate only the power that you need. So it's efficient and it's on demand. So what we have demonstrated so far, what are our accomplishments? We've demonstrated for the first time in history that a solid state device can generate power, electric power, without combustion. It is clean and it's affordable and it's scalable. You can scale it from very small power, as I showed you, because each one is a little nano diode, to large power from 100 megawatts to 200 megawatts, and going on the low end, it can be microwatts. So it's scalable from whatever you need in terms of usage. A lot of scientists in the country and the world have looked at it over the past decade. And the term that they consistently come up with is what we are, the transistor of the energy business. What the transistor did to the vacuum tube, we are poised to do the same thing to the energy business. That's the comparison that's been given. So where are we now? What's the value proposition? The value proposition is a patented new technology generating power without combustion. And it's distributed power. You don't need to build any huge infrastructures to deliver whatever you need. It's distributed and it can use whatever energy source that's available in abundance where you are. The beauty of this system is energy source agnostic. It doesn't matter what you use. If you want to put hydrogen and ammonia into it, then your exhaust is going to be no greenhouse gases, zero. If you want to put hydrocarbons, like a transition fuel, like natural gas or propane, you will get CO2 emissions and you will get H2O emissions, but the efficiency is so high that you're going to get reduced amount of CO2 emissions. So you're still gaining while using a transition fuel that's abundantly available today to take us from where we are to the next generation of fuels and power generation.
What are your efficiencies?
Sorry?
What are your efficiencies?
Well, I will go to that. The next slide will tell you what our efficiencies are. Finally, we use the existing fabrication and distribution infrastructure. So you don't have to build a $50 billion new power plant or a fabrication plant to get it to market. Your emissions, if you use non-hydrocarbons, and then obviously I've shown the cost, is 1/10 that of the existing comparable technologies. To answer your question, We do the efficiency comparison in terms of systems, not just in terms of can my little diode produce how much power? What is my system efficiency? Our system efficiency, it can be generated and compared to what the existing technologies are. So the energy density per unit mass compared to any other generation storage technologies, 10 to 30 times better. What that means is if I have a lithium-ion battery that you generate stores 1 unit of power in a certain weight, it'll last for so long. You take the same system and replace it with an energy source in our system, it will last you either 30 times longer or it will carry 13 times the weight if you're doing transportation. So that's the efficiency comparison, the real world efficiency comparisons. That for the same fuel, so for example, if you're in a car, it will go 4 times further for the same gallon of gas. There's your efficiency.
Natural gas is about 50 to 60% efficient for electricity generation.
Yeah, but see, this one is theoretical efficiency, conversion efficiency of 100%, because we're not doing any combustion. All we're doing is change of state from stored state to electronic state. And the losses are usually in the physical system. You know, can you collect all the electrons that you generate? Yes, can you have the energy of the molecule that's being transferred to the electron match the barrier heights of these? So these are efficiency kind of things that you can play with from here to end.
What's the time to make this? Is it the same as a combustion engine? The same amount of time to make the energy?
The energy is instantaneous. It's just as soon as you put air and fuel onto it. So for example, if I take hydrogen and air and I pass it through it, as soon as I pass through it, instantly the electrons come on. It's instantaneous. It doesn't burn anything. It's just all it does. It goes on this little, on this nano solid state system, starts an exothermic chemical reaction and converts it directly to electrons.
And how big does it have to be?
Doesn't have to be. It can be as small. I mean, the system that we look at, the cross section of our system is less than 2% the size of human hair. As far as the area is concerned, you can make it as large as you want because that's a physical dimension that's constrained by fabrication processes. The beauty of this is because it's so thin, you change the metrics from a surface power density to a volumetric power density. I'll give you an example. If I take 1 square centimeter of it and I pass a certain amount of gas on it, it generates, say, 1 watt, just for comparison. I can stack 6 of these little diodes in 1 cubic centimeter. So in 1 cubic centimeter, for the same amount of air and fuel that I put through it, I'm generating 6 watts per cubic centimeter. Now, this is all running at room temperature. If I raise the temperature a little bit from, say, room temperature to 80 degrees C, it'll increase the power 5x. But now all of a sudden, I've got not only 6, but 30 watts per cubic centimeter. That's the power of a rocket ship in a cubic centimeter. And I haven't changed the dimensions of anything. All I'm doing is changing the flow conditions that go underneath it and the concentrations that go into it. So my initial focus is really distributed power and have microgrids. You can actually have distributed EV charging stations because you don't need to have my grids come into your backyard to charge microgrids. You can have one of these sitting in your house that powers your house as also charges the EV charging, charges your electric vehicle. And finally, backup power. This is something that we're looking at for large, I want to say server farms, that they have these huge diesel generators as backup power. We can replace them at 1/10 the size, cost, efficiency. And other applications, obviously you can go into fully electric car. I can go into the details of it, fully electric heavy duty vehicles. To me, the holy grail, since we've shown that the power to mass ratio is 30 times better, is in aviation. You look at a drone and you have a drone which has a lithium-ion battery and you replace that lithium-ion battery with our system, it'll go 30 times longer or will carry 30 times the weight for the same configuration. And in transportation and aviation, the holy grail is really power to mass ratio. And finally, you can extend it to electric, air, rail, and marine systems too. These are all long-term, I want to say, applications and roadmaps. It's just like the transistor. When the transistor was first invented, the first computer was the size of this room. Today, my watch has 3 giga operations per second and per minute. So this is what the future will look like in the energy business. we're just at the starting gate. We are not at the ending gate. So where do we stand right now? What we've done is done all the development, I want to say retirement, a whole bunch of issues. We've gone from science to fabrication to designing what the first prototype looks like. We actually built partially the first prototype that you saw. And we are now looking for funding to take it to completion, finish these systems that we've done and take it to what I call field test. We have actually a contract within a national energy company that once we finish this little prototype demo unit, they're going to field test it. That's going to take them 3 months. And from that point on, we're going to look at application of this in the microgrids.
So how much money are
Obviously,
you looking for? What does that give us?
Well, we have raised so far Series A and Series B rounds. So we raised quite a bit of money. We are looking for Series C round to the tune of $10 million.
How much have you raised?
We raised over 20 million so far in Series A.
Grants or?
Pardon me? No, they're all venture funds.
So it was 20 million raised?
Yes, in Series A and Series B.
What was the post-money valuation on that one?
I can,
You can disclose it.
pardon me?
You can disclose it.
Uh,
You want to disclose all?
No, so
We're all
I
qualified.
didn't understand the question.
What was the post-money valuation?
115 million.
And so what's the pre-money in this next round?
We haven't determined that yet. We're waiting for the lead investor to come in and have discussions on it. And it depends on the structure that they want to have. Because there are different options available. They can go A, B, C, D, different structures.
And who's on the capital stack? Any notable people?
Well, the Series A was from a very deep-pocketed $100 billion fund. Series B was taken by the minority investor, and they brought in their own group of investors. They're all, I want to say Series A and Series B are.
So what names?
I'm not allowed to disclose those names. So I cannot I have confidentiality agreements with them.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, I'd be happy to one-on-one. I'm not allowed to.
I mean, I'm sorry, it's not in Crunchbase or something like
No,
that?
we don't have any on, because this was all done.
Are the investors aren't American? Are they?
They're all American. It's local. There's not a single foreign investor. They're all local investors.
One of the largest names in America.
It's one of the largest names in America. Thank you. We have about 31 US patents and 33 international patents. We have almost 70 patents, and we got a whole portfolio of patents still pending. The first thing we tried to do was protect our patent portfolio. Yes, sir.
So you've raised capital. What's the big issue? What has been holding you up from getting to the field test?
Just trying, I think the pandemic didn't help us because it just put I want to say, a damper on it. We were in the process of raising funds, and with the advent of the pandemic, pretty much slowed us down for the next 2 to 3 years. We weren't allowed to go into our lab because we were not the essential commodity, if you may. So we're not trying to regroup and resurface from there.
Is this technology used currently in anything else?
No, this is just in the development stage still. I mean, from what we have in agreement with the energy company I'm talking about is a 9 to 12 month window that once we get the funding, within 9 to 12 months, we're going to give them the picture that you saw of the 5 kilowatt power plant. They will take 3 months to do the field testing, and we already have agreed upon what are the criteria for acceptance of those field tests.
Who's the off-taker? Can you disclose that?
Pardon me?
Can you disclose the off-taker? The person who's going to be doing the.
Oh, it's the largest international energy company in India. It's an Indian company. They're the largest energy. Pardon me?
The trial's not being done in the United States.
They're the first ones who are going to be doing the trial,
Not in the United States.
not in the United States. We have some other people we're negotiating with in the United States to do the same field testing, but currently we don't have a partner that we have signed an agreement. We have an agreement with this company in India because there's a need there. They're trying to build an infrastructure for clean power generation. So there's an incentive to go to market much faster with almost no barriers, if you may, to entry. Yes.
What are the key raw materials?
Oh, very simple. What we use is platinum as a catalyst, but we use only 5 nanometers of platinum. And the semiconductor is white band semiconductor, which is titanium dioxide. which is widely available. And one thing that we use is try to use materials that are not, essentially can be recycled too. The platinum, as I mentioned, is 5 nanometers thick. And so if you look at how much power it can generate, 1 gram of platinum will generate about 23 kilowatts of power. And in fact, 1 centimeter square, you get even micrograms of power, which is not even considered as ore. But the reason we use platinum and nanoparticles is because it's a uniform catalyst that can start the reaction of different various fuels that we want to use. For hydrogen, we run it at, for example, room temperature. You don't have to increase the temperature to any other place.
How is your technology different than fuel cells?
Very different. A fuel cell is, let me explain how a fuel cell works, and I'll tell you how we work. Fuel cell works on a principle that you take, first of all, it works only on hydrogen. Fuel cell will not use any other fuel. So if you look at saying direct methanol fuel cells and so on and so forth, what they do is they have a reformer that takes basically the methanol, takes the hydrogen out and uses hydrogen to create power, and the rest of the stuff is burnt out. So that's difference number one. Difference number two is that when you look at a fuel cell, basically the reaction happens is they split the hydrogen into a proton and an electron. So the proton goes through a membrane, whether it be liquid membrane or it be a solid membrane. And the electron goes outside into the circuit. And on the other side, oxygen comes in, the electron comes in, the proton goes through and it becomes water vapor. So the electrons are coming from the hydrogen, from the fuel. In our case, the electrons are coming from the conducting surface. It really doesn't care. So the faster the reaction, in 1 square centimeter of platinum, you get 10 to 17 electrons. So I can excite all those 10 to the power 17 electrons with the reaction on this side. So I'm not limited by the electrons. So I can generate as much power as I want. And it's a solid state device. There's nothing to it. I mean, it's essentially just like a light emitting diode. What happens with light emitting diode? You got electricity coming in. Electricity coming in and light coming out. Ours is similar. Energy source comes in, electricity comes out. And that's why our system is called an EED, electricity emitting diode. Yes, sir. Yes, my first life, I was an engineer and I did software development companies. And my specialty was not only the dynamics at Berkeley, and I specialized in fact, seismic engineering. And I did the seismic retrofit of the Golden Gate Bridge. And that was one of my marquee projects. And I did a lot of consulting work for the oil companies while in my early stages. And that's where I got interested in energy, physics, chemistry. And the reason for this success is really, it is a combination of 3 areas of science. You must know surface chemistry, because without chemistry, nothing works. But chemistry, professors in academia are focused only on chemical engineering. The second is physics. You are now talking about electrons. So you have to know chemistry and you got to know physics. But now that you know the relation between chemistry and physics, how do you make it real? You have to have a device, and that's where semiconductor physics comes in. So you have to have 3 fields that have to understand each other, cross-talk to each other for this to work. And my team, if you look at it, they're the best scientists from chemistry, from physics, and from semiconductor physics. It's some semiconductor industry. And the difference also in the semiconductor industry, all that the semiconductor industry does is looks at the opposite of what we're doing. So you have metal and you have a semiconductor. That becomes your diode. In the semiconductor industry, they want to push electrons from the semiconductor side to the metal side. They want to prevent everything coming from this side to this side. I'm completely the opposite. So I'm saying, no, I don't want anything coming from the semiconductor side. I want everything going from the metal side to the semiconductor side. And there's absolutely no literature on that. Because what the semiconductor industry has been trying to do is prevent what I'm trying to do. So it's completely an opposite mirror image of what we've been doing. Yes, sir.
So you asked 2 questions. Are you a semiconductor in reverse?
Pretty much. But yeah, exactly right. I mean, so think about it is in semiconductor in reverse is electrons go from the semiconductor side to the metal side.
Yeah.
First thing I'm doing is I'm taking electrons going from the metal side to the semiconductor side. But that's not sufficient. For my system to work, you have to have certain configuration and the thickness limitations between the metal and the semiconductor. I have to have ballistic transport of the electron going from the metal to the semiconductor side.
So second question, I'll try to make this really simple. So you've got one house that's solar powered with traditional kind of like house appliances. Second house is on the grid, running on propane and generators, kind of like pretty popular these days. The third house is on, maybe PG&E, gas and electric. Where are you deploying first?
Well,
And what system do you replace? Are you replacing something that's already on one of these three houses, or are you replacing PG&E? Are you replacing the solar panel? Or how do you fit in that ecosystem?
Well, first of all, it can be in all three places. I mean, the utilization can be in all three spaces, can be used as backup power. But my way of looking at life is go directly, provide the direct support for what you're trying to do. So you'll be off the grid, completely off the grid from PG&E. So you will put this
rural application.
Yeah, or even for example, urban application. You can take the system and put it in your garage. You already have a natural gas pipeline coming in.
Sure.
So just all you do is plug your pipeline, natural gas pipeline in here, and you're off the grid. That's all you need.
Yeah, but your system puts out DC, your house runs on AC.
Yeah, but you see what you do, exactly, good point. So if you look at my picture that I showed you of the tower, there's the DC plug that comes out, but you put an inverter in it, and then the inverter converts into like AC power.
And you talked about real time on demand, which means you're not advocating use of battery.
The beauty of this is no battery required. It's energy on demand. If you look at fuel cells too, why is fuel cell, hydrogen fuel cell car not that much popular? They need a lithium-ion battery. In fact, the fuel cell actually charges the battery, and the battery is the one that runs your car.
Yeah, it's very.
So the bypasses battery. There's no battery required. It's power, instantaneous power on demand.
It fits with. I live down in Atherton in San Diego County, and the Planning and Building Division wants us to have all electric.
Electrification, absolutely.
Yeah, natural gas, and so it's very confusing to the consumer. The Euro solves all the problems.
But see, that's exactly what we're trying to do.
How long until you're going to be attached to my house? 10 years away, 5 years away?
As I mentioned, see, once we finish the demo unit, and the demo unit has been field tested, then it accelerates into the marketplace in probably less than a year. But then it's scaling, going from 1 unit to 1 million, to 100,000 units to 1 million. Then it's just fabrication and distribution issues.
Like a magical electric.
Are there any semiconductor engineers here? Oh, what do you think?
I need some more data, right?
Yeah, I think so also, right? It's not really a Series B, because Series B usually has revenue.
The hardware space is very different. Hardware always takes a long time.
The difference that we spent time on is to make sure that all the fabrication that you do here, basically the fabrication is the diodes, right? So we did a process engineering that you can utilize in Intel's yesterday's foundries, not tomorrow's. The rest of the system is standard mechanical engineering. There's nothing fancy about it. So that's why we said when we had IDEO design and build this prototype.
Because that can't be.
No, I didn't hear the question.
Is it input energy agnostic? Yeah.
No. I said it's input energy agnostic in the sense that the same system can use different types of energy sources. So, for example, it can use hydrogen, it can use ammonia, it can use natural gas, it can use gasoline. So it has to have an energy source. Absolutely, that allows you to have an exothermic reaction for it to convert the stored energy into electrical energy. No, it's not converting thermal energy. That's what I'm getting at.
This is a very thick conversation, and I have a plane to catch.
So please contact me. I'd be happy to. I'm giving you 15 years worth of work condensed in less than 15 minutes. That's a lot of work. Thank you.
Great job. Thanks so much. Thanks, Tyson.